My name is Ethan Carter. I am 32 years old, and for most people, I am the definition of success. When people see me, they see a man in a tailored suit stepping out of a black sedan, phone pressed to his ear, talking about numbers and deals. They see a confident smile, a man who has built something from dust and turned it into gold. They don't see what happens after the door closes at night. I live in a house that feels too quiet. Every step echoes against marble floors and glass walls, bouncing off success and landing in emptiness. The lights are warm. The air is scented with imported candles, but the silence still finds its way in, creeping into corners, settling over the dining table like dust. That's where my wife, Lena, usually sits. We've been married for 5 years. To others, we look perfect. She's beautiful, graceful, the kind of woman who makes people stop talking for a second when she enters a room. But in the past few months, something in her eyes has changed. She's there, sitting across from me, smiling, yet somehow, far away. I used to think it was work stress, or maybe just fatigue. But when you love someone deeply, you start noticing the small things. The tone in their voice, the way they avoid your gaze, how their laughter fades too quickly. Sometimes, late at night, I'd wake up and find her sitting by the window. The curtains would be half open, her phone screen glowing faintly against her face. She'd turn it off the moment she sensed me waking. When I'd ask what she was doing, she'd just smile and whisper, "Nothing, go back to sleep." But I couldn't. The mind is cruel. It takes a simple moment and turns it into a storm of thoughts. Who is she talking to? Was there someone from her past? Someone she still missed? A few days ago, I came home earlier than usual. It was raining, the city washed in grey. I stepped into the house, and there she was, sitting on the sofa, lost in a photo on her phone. She didn't hear me at first. The look in her eyes wasn't sadness. It was longing. When she noticed me, she quickly locked the screen. "You're home early," she said, forcing a smile. "Who was that?" I asked gently. She hesitated, just for a second. But in that single heartbeat, something shattered. "Just an old friend," she said. I wanted to believe her. God, I tried to. But something in her voice made my chest tighten. That night, I went to bed pretending everything was fine. She lay beside me, scrolling on her phone until she turned it face down on the table. I closed my eyes, but I wasn't asleep. My mind kept circling the same thought. Who was she texting? And why did her heart seem so far away from me? The next morning, I found her in the kitchen making coffee. She looked beautiful in her quiet way, wearing one of my shirts. I wanted to tell her how much I loved her, how much I missed her, even though she was right there. But instead, we exchanged polite smiles. Strangers sharing a home built on routine. At work, I couldn't focus. Every time my phone buzzed, I half hoped it would be her saying, "I love you," like she used to. But the messages were just about bills, errands, reminders. No warmth, no spark. I started to wonder if I was the problem. Maybe I'd changed. Maybe success had cost me something. Time, attention, love. Maybe she just felt lonely, the same way I did. That night, I decided to make it up to her. I booked a dinner reservation at her favorite place, the small Italian restaurant where we had our first date. I even brought flowers, the same kind she loved, lilies, soft and white. When I told her, she smiled, but it wasn't the kind of smile that reaches the eyes. It was the kind of smile people wear to hide their pain. We went anyway. The restaurant looked the same. Candlelight, soft music, laughter in the air. But between us, there was only silence. Halfway through dinner, her phone buzzed. She glanced at it quickly, then turned it face down. My heart thudded. I tried to ignore it, but my mind screamed. Finally, I asked, "Lena, is there something you're not telling me?" She froze. For a moment, her mask slipped. I saw fear in her eyes. Not guilt, not anger, just fear. Ethan, she whispered. Please don't ask me that. Her voice cracked. And that was all it took to break me. I wanted to reach across the table, to hold her hand, to tell her that whatever it was, I could forgive it. But before I could speak, she stood up and said softly, I need some air. I watched her leave, my throat tight, the sound of her heels fading into the night. That was the moment I knew. My wife was keeping something from me, something deep enough to tear us apart. When I came home later, she was asleep on the couch, still wearing her dress. Her phone lay beside her, half slid under a cushion. I stared at it for a long time. Every part of me wanted to look, to find the truth. But my hands trembled. Trust, once broken, never comes back whole. I turned away and went upstairs. But even as I lay in bed, I knew that the next day I would have to find out, because love without truth is just a beautiful lie. The next morning began like any other. Sunlight creeping through the blinds, the faint smell of coffee drifting through the house, and the quiet rustle of Lena moving around the kitchen. But something had changed. The air between us felt heavier, as if the silence itself carried weight. She didn't meet my eyes when she spoke, and when she smiled, it felt practiced, like an actor who's played the same role too many times. I sat at the table, pretending to scroll through my phone, but my mind was miles away. Last night had cracked something open inside me. The way she'd said, please don't ask me that, replayed in my head over and over. What was she afraid to tell me? By the time she kissed me on the cheek and left for her morning yoga class, I already knew I wouldn't be going to the office. Not today. I waited until her car disappeared down the driveway before I walked upstairs to the study. Her phone was gone, of course, but something told me the truth wasn't just in her messages. It was in her eyes, her behavior, her distance. And yet, I needed more than instincts. I needed proof. For the first time in my life, I opened her laptop. I hated myself for it, but the fear inside me was stronger than guilt. Her password was the same as always. A date, but not our anniversary. It was June 17th. I didn't recognize that date. The screen came to life. Emails, photographs, folders, normal things. I almost closed it, ashamed of myself. But then, one folder caught my eye. It was labeled Memories. Inside were pictures. Old ones. Lena before she met me, her friends, college days, trips. And in several of them, there was the same man. He had kind eyes, the kind that tell you he's seen both joy and loss. In every photo, he was standing close to her. Too close. In one, his arm was around her shoulder. In another, she was laughing while he looked at her. Not the camera. It was that kind of look you don't fake. I scrolled further and found a video file named Us. My finger hesitated above the mouse. My heart was pounding, my palms sweaty. I clicked it. The video opened with Lena's voice, soft and full of life. A voice I hadn't heard in months. Say hi, she said, laughing. The camera turned to the man. Hi, he smiled. I'm Daniel. Daniel. That name hit me like thunder. I paused the video, staring at the screen. My mind tried to connect the dots, but it refused. She'd never mentioned a Daniel, not once. I pressed play again. They were sitting by a lake, sunlight glimmering on the water. She leaned her head on his shoulder, and he said, Promise me, no matter where life takes us, you'll never forget me. She smiled. I could never forget you. The video ended there. I sat frozen, the sound of my heartbeat filling the room. I didn't know how long I stayed like that, staring at the screen. Part of me wanted to throw the laptop against the wall. Another part wanted to weep. Instead, I closed it gently, like it was something sacred. A memory that didn't belong to me. That afternoon, Lena came home. I watched her from across the kitchen as she unpacked groceries, humming quietly. The sight of her doing something so ordinary made it worse. I finally spoke. Lena, who's Daniel? Her hands froze midair. A bag of oranges slipped from her fingers and rolled across the floor. For a few seconds, the only sound was the fruit hitting the tiles. Then she whispered, "Where did you hear that name?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Her eyes filled with tears. She turned away, pressing her palms against the counter as if trying to steady herself. "Ethan," she said softly, "please don't make me lie." Then don't. Silence again. Heavy. Unforgiving. Finally she turned around, her face pale. "Daniel was someone I loved. Before you. Before everything." The words hit like cold steel. "I thought I moved on," she continued. "I really did. When I met you, I was broken, and you made me believe in love again. You were kind, patient, everything he wasn't." "Wasn't?" I repeated, my voice hoarse. "What happened to him?" She hesitated. "He died. 5 years ago." The room tilted. My heart twisted. Half in pain, half in confusion. "He died a few months before I met you," she said quietly. "But sometimes I still see him. Not literally, in dreams, in moments, in memories. He was my first love, Ethan. I buried him, but part of me never stopped missing him." She stepped closer, her eyes pleading. "I love you. I swear I do. But sometimes I feel like I'm betraying him just by being happy again." Her confession was a knife with two edges. One cutting me, the other cutting her. I didn't know what to say. How do you compete with a ghost? How do you fight a memory? That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay beside her, staring at the ceiling. Her breathing was soft and steady, but my thoughts weren't. She hadn't cheated. She hadn't lied about loving someone. But somehow it still felt like betrayal. Emotional, invisible. She was mine, yet her heart belonged to the past. The next few days passed in slow motion. I went to work, but nothing seemed real. My office, my meetings, my life. All of it felt like a story written for someone else. I started noticing little things. The way Lena avoided certain songs, certain movies, as if they brought back something painful. She still smiled when I kissed her, but there was always that small flicker of distance in her eyes. One evening, I came home early again. She was in the living room, sorting through old books. I stood by the doorway watching her. "Do you still think about him?" I asked quietly. She looked up, startled. Then she nodded. "Sometimes. Not because I want to. Because memories don't ask for permission." Her honesty disarmed me. I walked closer, sat beside her, and for the first time in weeks, took her hand. "I don't want to be a replacement," I said. "I just want to be your peace." Tears rolled down her cheeks as she whispered, "You already are. I'm just trying to forgive myself for letting go of someone I once loved." In that moment, I realized love isn't about erasing the past. It's about standing beside someone who carries their ghosts and hoping they choose you anyway. But even as I held her that night, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more. Something in her story didn't fit. If Daniel had died 5 years ago, why was her password still that date? What really happened on June 17th? The question echoed in my head long after she fell asleep. A quiet whisper, growing louder with every passing day. Because sometimes, the darkest secrets aren't the ones buried in the past. They're the ones still breathing beside you. They're the ones still breathing beside you. Is just a beautiful lie, and I had lived in that lie long enough. For days after Lena's confession, life seemed to find a fragile rhythm again. We spoke more, smiled more. I started believing that maybe we could rebuild what had cracked between us. But beneath that calm surface, something still felt wrong. Her words haunted me. He died 5 years ago. Yet every time I looked into her eyes, I saw something alive. The kind of grief that hasn't settled. The kind that hides something deeper. And then there was that date, June 17th. I tried to dismiss it, to convince myself it was nothing more than an old memory. But the more I ignored it, the louder it echoed in my mind. That date had meaning, and I couldn't rest until I knew what it was. One evening, after Lena had gone to meet her friend for coffee, I sat at her desk again. The laptop stared back at me, the same cold glow on the screen. I opened the calendar app. June 17th was marked every year. No title, no description, just a quiet reminder that repeated itself. The digital ghost of something important. A sudden thought struck me. I searched through her email archives, filtering for that date. Most were routine messages, work, receipts, subscriptions. But one email stood out. It was 5 years old. Subject line: I'm sorry. Sender: Daniel Hart. My breath caught. I clicked it. The message was short, painfully short. Lena, I can't keep doing this. I'm sorry for everything. Maybe one day you'll forgive me. D. Attached to it was a photo. A picture of Lena and Daniel together, sitting on the hood of a car, smiling. The timestamp was June 16th, the day before the email. And then, as I scrolled further down, there was another message from a hospital. Subject: Accident report, Daniel Hart. Dated June 18th. I opened it with shaking hands. The message confirmed Daniel had died in a car accident on the night of June 17th. The date she used as her password wasn't the day they met or a birthday. It was the day he died. I closed the laptop slowly, my chest hollow. She wasn't holding on to love. She was holding on to guilt. When Lena came home later, I was sitting in the dark. She flicked on the light, startled. Ethan, why are you sitting like that? I looked up at her, my voice barely above a whisper. June 17th. Her body went still. The grocery bag slipped from her hand. You looked. I nodded. For a long time, she said nothing. Then, with trembling hands, she sat across from me. You weren't supposed to see that, she said softly. Then tell me, I said. Tell me the truth you've been burying. She closed her eyes, and a tear slid down her cheek. That night, she began, Daniel called me. He wanted to meet. He said he'd been drinking, that he needed to talk. I was supposed to go, but I didn't. We'd already broken up. I told him it was over. Her voice cracked. He got in his car anyway. He drove drunk. They said it happened near the old bridge. The car hit the railing and went into the river. I stared at her, stunned. You think it was your fault? She nodded weakly. If I had gone, maybe he wouldn't have driven. Maybe he'd still be alive. Her words hung in the air like smoke, heavy and suffocating. That's why you kept his memory, I said. That's why you can't let go. She covered her face with her hands. I tried to move on, Ethan. I really did. But that guilt, it followed me everywhere. Every year, I remember the sound of his voice that night. The way he said, I need you. And I didn't go. I wanted to be angry, but all I felt was sorrow. Not for her secret, but for the burden she'd carried alone all this time. I reached out, took her hands away from her face, and said quietly, You've punished yourself long enough. She shook her head. You don't understand. You shouldn't have to live with someone who's haunted. Then let me be haunted with you, I said. If ghosts are what you have, then I'll share them. But stop facing them alone. Tears fell freely down her face. For the first time, she didn't hide them. And for the first time, I saw the real Lena. Fragile, scared, human. We didn't talk much after that. She rested her head on my shoulder, and I held her until the silence stopped hurting. In the weeks that followed, things changed slowly, subtly. Like dawn creeping over the horizon, she began seeing a therapist. She started writing again, journaling the things she could never say aloud. Sometimes I'd find her sitting by the window, staring at the night sky. But now, when I joined her, she didn't turn away. She'd smile faintly and say, I was just remembering. And I'd answer, It's okay to remember. Just don't live there. We began visiting new places, small weekend trips away from the city. One evening by the sea, she took my hand and said, I finally changed my password. I smiled. To what? She leaned close and whispered, Today's date. It was a small thing, but to her, to us, it meant everything. Still, the past doesn't vanish. One night, months later, I found her sitting in the living room, staring at an old photograph of Daniel. She didn't hide it. Instead, she handed it to me. "This was him," she said softly. "The man I loved before I knew what love really meant." I looked at the picture. He seemed kind, full of life. I felt no jealousy, only understanding. "You don't have to erase him," I said. "Just make space for both. For what was, and what is." She smiled through her tears. "You really are too good for me." I shook my head. "No, just someone who refuses to let love be defined by pain." We sat there for a while, the rain tapping softly against the windows. For the first time, the silence between us wasn't heavy. It was peaceful. Months turned into a year. Life began to bloom again in places I thought were dead. We laughed more, fought less. I saw her joy return, hesitant but real. And on one quiet morning, June 17th, she woke up early, dressed in white, and walked into the garden. I followed her. She carried a single lily and placed it beneath the old oak tree, whispering something I couldn't hear. When she turned back to me, there was no sorrow in her eyes, only calm. "What did you say to him?" I asked gently. She smiled faintly. "Goodbye." Then she took my hand, and we stood there together, the past finally at rest. Later that evening, as we watched the sunset from our porch, she rested her head against my shoulder and whispered, "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I hadn't met you?" I looked at her, at the woman who had once been a stranger, a secret, a storm, and I said softly, "Then neither of us would have learned what forgiveness feels like." She smiled, closing her eyes. "You saved me, Ethan." I shook my head. "No, you just finally let yourself live again." The sky deepened into shades of gold and crimson. The wind carried the scent of lilies, her favorite. For once, everything felt right, because love, I realized, isn't about perfection or certainty. It's about choosing to stay, even when the heart is a battlefield of memories. Lena's dark secret had almost destroyed us, but in revealing it, she'd given us something far greater, truth. And in truth, we found a way back to each other. We found a way back to each other.